Our panel. Our panel. It's about us.
Hi, welcome back to season 2 of Our Panel. We're now in episode 2 of this season. I'm your host, Dr. Krystal Redman, and I'm joined here by my two amazing co-panelists and co-hosts, Dr. Rose and Dr. Q. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you.
Y'all look great. This green teal situation.
It.
This is awesome, and we did not plan this.
We did not.
No.
We really didn't.
At all. So we're here, right? We're
We're
here.
here.
This is beautiful. So it means we're on the same wavelength when it comes, to, especially to this conversation here today. Which honestly is going to be a very fragile conversation. So we just want to alert our viewers in that this information today will be very sensitive. So be mindful as you're viewing our episode. Today's episode is on gun violence within schools. Well, as we were planning out this season of Our Panel, we wanted to enter in a State of America lens. As you know, over the last 3 COVID years since we last filmed, we've had so many things happen, not just the COVID pandemic, but also navigating a multitude of different issues directly and indirectly affecting our communities. But so many things have also remained the same. Although we've always navigating, unfortunately, gun violence within school, we're seeing an increase in it, unfortunately, within all demographics and different communities, not just public schools, but now more so private schools. So the reason why we're uplifting gun violence today within our episode, specifically in school, is because it's a public health issue. And if we do not address this issue from a public health lens, then we aren't truly diving deep enough to really look at some of the interventions and possible strategies we can collectively use in order to address and end gun violence within schools, ultimately to protect our communities, our little ones, and our families. So why don't we get into this very sensitive conversation and try to begin with really some facts about gun violence within schools for our communities.
Absolutely. So as you stated, this is a public health emergency. It's a public health crisis. Gun violence is now the #1 killer of young kids in our country. The number one. And this to me is really, really alarming because young people should be able to go to school and be able to thrive and enjoy themselves. But what we're seeing is an increase in gun violence in the school environment itself. And since Columbine, which happened in 1999, it feels like it was forever ago, but
I wasn't even born. I don't know what you're talking about.
since Columbine, over 300,000 students have experienced gun violence in school. And that number is so alarming, 300,000. And when you think about, guns in homes, 4.6 million young people either live in a home with a gun that is unlocked or not in a safe. And that, to me, I think is something that we definitely need to address, safety when it comes to guns. And when we're talking about our young people, our Black young people, Black students make up 14% of the United States population, but they account for 46% of the deaths by firearm. And I think that that is just so devastating that our young people are being killed at a much higher rate than other communities. And this is happening more so in the school environment.
Absolutely. And I want to be very specific here too as well, because although our panel is designed to create an intentional safe space, because we can't guarantee a safe space and you can never guarantee safety anywhere, but an intentional space for our communities to speak about our issue in our lives. If we're not, it's not that we're not speaking about other multitude of communities or whatnot, it's that we want to create a space to where our communities are centered, because as we know, when we center folks within the furthest proximities to power, we're actually centering everyone by centering our communities. So specifically, in this conversation today, although we're not speaking specifically about Black and brown students within schools, we're speaking about all of our students with the intentionality of addressing it as a global public health issue, or not even rather global, because we're seeing different disparities in other countries, but a public health issue within the US. We have to speak about all of our students, more so thinking about the demographics or what have you, but we're seeing it across the board. And one thing I want to say about the demographics here is that not just, our young students, but also our young students with multitude of different identities. We're seeing young queer students, specifically lesbian students, are typically about, I would say 5 out of 10 gay, lesbian, queer young students are constantly being threatened with gun violence or any other form of weaponized violence while on school property. So it's not just, our Black brown, BIPOC students, or just all of our students. We have to think about the multiple intersecting identities that we hold within schools too as well, that increase our risk of being threatened or being subject to, unfortunately, harm and gun violence within school or structured institutions, which, as you said, school should be a safe place, especially for our young folks and the workers too as well.
Absolutely. Yes, and I know me and Dr. Rose talk about how school is supposed to be the safe place.
That's right.
And also, Dr. Rose, I know you described how food insecurities in students where most of their nutrition, some students come from schools. And as a parent of a school-aged children, it is definitely an emergency. And this episode is hitting my heart deeply because now I'm having conversations with my kids, and we'll go into later about personal stories about intruders and drills that they are going through. And the conversations we all talked about needs to start at home, in our communities, and this show is great for this conversation.
Absolutely, because as we know, and as we said on other episodes, Black folks especially, we're getting sick, we're dying for all these different intersecting attacks on our lives, on our families, on our communities, and also our children, right? But then we're thinking about systemic inequities and such, but we forget about schools, right? We forget about schools because we consider schools or structured institutions of schooling, because there's multiple ways of schooling our children, but when we enter our children into a structural institution of education, we're thinking safety, right? For the most part, because we know there's implicit bias and things of that nature that shows up there too, as well as the system, let's be honest. But we're considering the fact that when we drop our kids off, they get picked up for the bus or what have you, they're safe. And as I said when we started this episode, you can never guarantee safety anywhere, not even in a space that's intentionally created for our communities, right? So we're seeing those disparities in that because what our expectations are for this type of system or institution isn't the reality. And what we're talking about here is not just like institutionalized harm, we're talking about outside harm, the targeting of young folks within, a safe space or what have you, that continues to increase. And I think as we begin to talk about potential things we can do as a community, as parents, navigate this, because also as a parent of a school-age child, I'm scared,
Absolutely.
I'm scared all the time anyways with children, but I'm specifically scared when our children are going to school. And I know your child is also, you're thinking about bringing your child into daycare or some formalized way of education and such. And it's just really scary. You have to think about a lot of other things, who's taking care of your child, who has access to your child, what information are they giving to your child. But now we're just scared because someone may enter into the property and harm our children, the workers, the teachers, and et cetera. So going back, we have to be able to do something, right? Take some form of action. And what I want to uplift here is the government's role in creating a safer space or environment. And we were speaking about the fact that on the ground, grassroots folks that are truly like showing up at the Capitol, yelling at their legislators, arguing for these policies that will ban, firearms or put a stricter regulation on firearms. The actions are being led by our children. You see young folks at the Capitol, yelling and talking to their legislators and being active and such. And I mean, there's a mix of demographics, but young folks are leading this movement, and our government's not listening. They're ignoring.
They're not, and I think it's important, like you said, it's the young people, and it's the young people whose peers are being killed. And so I think that they have this vested interest in being able to see their friends when they go to school. Like you shared, as a parent, it is starting to be very scary, scary to send your child out of your home. You have no way to ensure their safety.
That's right.
And I think we put a lot of responsibility on the school structure and the teachers.
Yes, that's right.
And I just don't think that it's fair that the teachers have to take really the full responsibility of keeping our students safe. We really need to do something about gun violence in general, people's ability to be able to access guns, and what's happening when the guns are in the home and not properly stored.
And Dr. Redman, what about that law passed? You said I know we talked about that earlier about teachers carrying.
Yes.
What was that about?
Goodness. Yes. So in Nashville, as you know, there was a most recent shooting at a Christian institution, at a private school. And I believe the shooter wanted to go to a public school or a different school, right? And just couldn't gain entry for whatever reason, and then saw this school, and there was a connection there. I think they went to this school a long time ago or something. Try not to read too much on the shooter because this is not about the shooter, this is about our children,
Right.
but began to forcefully enter the building by shooting down the two layers of security doors or what have you. But the resolution, right, the result of that was legislators saying, well, let's arm our teachers with firearms. Like, let's give them firearms and that's going to solve everything. Right. Like what?
Right.
The entire fleet. So the result of, a mass shooting and multiple children and adults being killed, right, within a government institution. Well, actually this one was a private institution, but nonetheless, within an institution that we should be, quote unquote, like I said, safe or safer in, is to throw in more firearms, arm folks that, we don't even know, they're not trained.
Right.
And also, do they even, that's not what they signed up for.
Right. Exactly.
People don't sign up for the most part. My partner is in education too as well, to carry, and then now I'm gonna give my life on the line and I'm in active duty. And even if you do carry, is this person equipped and prepared to actually shoot someone, which is heavy in itself. So our government's not showing up at all in the ways we need them to by centering public health, because throwing in more guns is not public health or safety at all.
Yeah. So as you were saying, the school environment is so important because of issues such as food insecurity in our country. And so a lot of people don't understand, young people are not getting fed at home. So school really is their primary source of nutrition. And when you add fear of gun violence, it really does impact not only their mental health, but their physical health, because they're not able to get access to these meals. And I think something else that's really important is school should be for reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Right.
Not for drop cover, there's an active shooter on campus. I really think we need to do something more globally, across the board, to be able to address this issue. And speaking about across the board and global, what are some things that you're seeing as it relates to gun violence in other countries?
In other countries, they have stricter gun laws based on mass shootings. For example, in New Zealand, 3 days after a mass shooting that killed over 50 people, the prime minister announced a sweeping ban of all military assault weapons, the same as in Canada and also in Australia. They're just more strict rules than here in the US, which is crazy to me.
That is, my goodness. And I don't understand why we can't follow suit.
Yeah, I agree.
If you have a mass casualty event as a result of the shooting, do something about it.
Yes, and in these countries, being able to carry is like a luxury, right? It's not a right.
Right.
And we lead with our right to carry here or bear arms or what have you. And it's we go back to the Constitution. The Constitution is bleep and bleep and bleep up, okay?
It's
so
old.
much.
It's
It is geriatric, right? Going back to our first episode in geriatric, the Constitution is very geriatric. It's rooted in racism and all the other isms and such. And going back to, the Constitution as a right is not principle enough and does not override our God-given right to be safe in this country, and for our children too as well. So outside of the shootings and everything, I really want to center on America as a Band-Aid. With our government, they're not actively putting in legislation and policies to protect us and center our public health and safety, right? So ultimately, some of the things that we do to kind of put a Band-Aid over things are giving the responsibility back to the schools and saying you fix it. You put in metal detectors and have your teachers act as security, or bring in more police, which we already understand for our students, our Black, Brown, Indigenous students, queer students, that there's a school to prison pipeline. And as a direct result of bringing in more armed guards or security guards and police presence within our schools too. So there's that balance, that element there. And just because you have guards or security or police within schools doesn't guarantee your safety, because we saw in Texas where the police, their lack of response, exactly, they were hesitant, and more kids and more adults died. So that's not the solution. And then we see other gadgets that us as parents were trying to put in on our kids just to try to, guarantee safety.
Band-Aids, like you said. You're talking about those Gizmo watches that the kids can text and the parents can track the location. But again, what else can a parent do?
Exactly, because we also spoke about bulletproof backpacks, and this one teacher who her husband is an engineer and I believe created some type of foldable wall or something, right?
Really?
And such, and they're like, well, this is perfect. And honestly, like if my kid is in that classroom and something happened, it is, but also that's not realistic. We can't, to address and end gun violence in school, the answer is not a bulletproof wall, bulletproof backpacks, or any type of gizmo or anything like that. And speaking about America's Band-Aids, I think that it's really important to bring in someone within the education system, especially bringing in an educator. So today we have a really special guest. Madison Santana has her master's in education and has been in education for over 12 years, specifically centering inner city youth and under-resourced youth. So welcome to our panel, Madison. Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to our panel. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You look wonderful. Thank you for being here. And thank you especially for being here for this dynamic conversation. I know the information here is very fragile and is very sensitive for not just parents and students, but also educators and folks within the education system. So thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. So what are some of your fears as an educator?
My fear is that one day I'll, enter the school building and similar to what has been happening in our country, that it will one day happen to us. And our students fear. Some of our students actually don't fear. Most of my students, I teach English as a second language. So a lot of my students are from different parts of the country. And just not too long ago, I interviewed some of my students and said, hey, how do you feel when you listen to the news about these mass shootings? Do you want to stay home the next day? Some of my students actually said, you know what? It happens in my country. I have a student from Mexico who, he's like, in my country, they ransack my book bag, every time. Like, I'm used to it. I'm cool with it. And I'm not afraid. But then we have some students, like I also teach students from Korea. And he's like, I spoke to him actually not too long ago. He's like, I'm scared. In my country, we don't have any guns. It doesn't happen in my country. So I fear for my students' emotional health when it comes to that, yeah.
So being a student in New York and then being a teacher in New Jersey, North Carolina, and now here in Georgia, what are some of the differences you've seen as it relates to gun violence in school?
Well, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in the 80s and the 90s. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of gun violence. And even in my schools, we had metal detectors. So this is something that I'm used to. Most of my colleagues are not used to that. So the differences that I've seen, especially working in New Jersey compared to the outskirts of Atlanta, our students seem a little bit more at ease here. There's no metal detectors. They seem to be a little bit more free. They get to class in time. And in New Jersey, with the metal detectors, they would have to come to school a little earlier. Sometimes they're always late. I taught first period, and half the class was always late. And the behaviors that I've seen, especially early in the morning, having to wake up early, having to, get frisked, checked, and then have to come into the classroom and then have to sit and listen to me teach them English. It's really frustrating for them. And I can see the differences. The students here are ready to learn. They don't have to deal with that. And the students in Newark, they're afraid, and it takes a lot of time to get into the building. So, yeah.
First of all, thank you for all you do for our future. I have a question about their emotional state. What are schools doing to help with their emotional mentalities, their emotional support, and what can we do at home to help our children with this?
Well, in our school district, we've implemented the SEL framework. There's 5 competencies.
What's SEL?
And SEL, social emotional learning.
Yes.
Social emotional learning. And there's 5 competencies, and they are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and basically, as teachers, we're humans too. So we walk into the classroom and sometimes we're down and out, right? So we also as teachers have professional development on how we can, control our emotions. Sometimes we don't feel like being there, and the students can see that. So how do we model that for them?
That's right.
And so that they are aware of their emotions. What are the solutions? Maybe we'll have a calm down corner where we can send the student over there. Like, you're having a hard time? Let's go over there.
That's right.
Just recently, I think it was like last week, it's the end of the school year, and we're ready to go, so there's a lot of testing, and the students are antsy, and I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like teaching today. However, let's do this. Who wants to go outside? We can do our work outside in the patio. And they're like, yeah, let's go outside. And I'm like, are you gonna do your work? They're like, yeah, we're gonna do our work. So we went outside, we worked, and it really helped. It helped me. We had some fresh air. My classroom does not have any windows. So we went outside, we had a great time. And then at the end of the class, after the bell, the students stayed and said, I'm so thankful that you allowed us to go outside. Are we able to do this again? I'm like, yeah, if you behave, we can do that. So social emotional learning is not the end all be all. However, it's a start. It's a start, and we allow students to express themselves, find solutions to the problem, the problems that they're having, and just be a support to them.
And I think that's really important, a takeaway here, that without the support of our legislature, without mass policies that come into our school institutions that directly affect our school institutions, there's not a lot we can do as parents, as a community, other than supporting each other, building a community where we feel safer, where we're collectively working together to create a more, I would say, it's just a supportive environment for mental health and emotional health too as well. So I think that's a really great resource, especially as we're navigating this very real public health crisis. So I think that's what we wanted to take away today, that these are the realities that we're facing within our school systems, especially when it comes to mass shootings within our school systems, and the fears that all of us have. And until our government can show up and show out for us, there are other things we can do as a community, and not just put a Band-Aid on it, because that's not going to be a long-term solution at all whatsoever, right? But as we're navigating this as a community, really creating spaces where we can just support each other, especially our students. Because one last thing, as you said, some of our students, like, this is our environment, we're used to gun, violence and things of that nature. That's not normal. Like, our community specifically have been desensitized to issues around gun violence in or outside of school, both, right? That's not normal. So how, even if the student isn't naming that there is an issue there, or there's anxiety or anything like that, creating that space regardless of what they're saying or how they're presenting is very important. So thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for everyone within the education system for all you do. And until next time of our panel, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to us at Our Panel TV on Instagram, and we'll be happy to respond to you. Take care.